This is Kevin Swanson with Generations, and I just received my copy of CT, Christianity Today. They give me a free copy once a year or so. It's kind of an exciting moment. It's an attempt to boost their subscriptions, not so much from me, but from others, I guess. And here we find, I think, another symbolic development in the dead and dying evangelo world of the 21st century. Welcome Nicole Massey Martin to the presidency of the CT organization, the first woman to take the helm, to oversee the sinking of that old flagship of evangelicalism. In case anybody's forgotten the legacy of evangelicalism formed by Billy Graham in the 1950s, well, Carl F.H. Henry was the first president or chief editor, then Harold Lindsay in the 1960s, and then Kenneth Conser in the 1970s on into 1996. Harold B. Smith was president later on, then David Neff between 1996 and 2007. Mark Galley was president of CT 2013 to 2020. Daniel Harrell in the early 2020s, then Timothy Dalrymple, and Russell Moore. Many of you remember Russell Moore took the helm in 2022, Marvin Olasky in 2025. Today, Nicole Massey Martin, welcome to the presidency of CT. It was the flagship of New Evangelicalism, founded in 1956 by Billy Graham and others. CT was supposed to provide a conservative Protestant, but serious, intellectually respectable alternative to both liberal mainline Protestantism, and then on the other hand, narrower separatist fundamentalism on the other hand. So they were right smack down the middle there. The magazine was supposed to give evangelicals a national platform, to turn it into something more intellectually serious and sort of helping unify the evangelical movement of the 1950s and 1960s, and of course distance them from that narrow fundamentalism. Turns out the Reformed element was its own island out there somewhere. But now the magazine has drawn lines in political terms and affiliations, mostly against conservative evangelical political sins, but then much less forceful against progressive cultural revolutions, secular institutions, public school ideology, big tech censorship, media dishonesty, or just that anti-Christian persecution and hostility out there. So they're not so much going after the leftists, but more after, well, shall we say it, Trump. So that asymmetry is why many readers hear prophetic courage in one direction and then softness towards the left in the other direction. Now, kowtowing to the left really hasn't done that much good for the liberal apostatizing denominations that are losing millions of members every year. I'm not sure that kowtowing to the left on the part of the leftist apostate evangelical crowd is really going to keep CT afloat either. CT is so yesterday, it's so relevant today, pretty much gone. Russell Moore just interviewed, quote, our friend David French on Christianity Today's podcast. That was last week. Just to remind us all how bad Donald Trump has been for the nation. David French was busy endorsing Tallarico, that Texas pro-transgender, pro-homosexual, pro-abortion, pro-everything that God is against. But let's just say it. Christianity Today's evangelicalism is no more. It's as good as gone. The halfway house wasn't halfway enough to sustain. But meanwhile, now keep an eye on what's happening with the liberal denominations. The liberal denominations like the PC U.S.A. have lost 67% of their members since 1980. And the average age of their members have risen from 46 to 67. Not good. Given these metrics, I just put this through the calculation, okay? The PC U.S.A. will be at 300,000 members by 2050, a 95% loss off of what was the top 6 million members a few years ago. We're looking at a 100-year decline altogether. So if you're calculating, there's a 100-year decline with a slight bump when the Southern Presbyterians joined the denomination in the 1980s. But that was, of course, the beginning of the PCA. The PC U.S.A. installed women elders, okay, history here, in 1930, and women pastors in the 1960s. Now, there's almost a perfect correlation between the ordination of female leaders and the decline in the membership of the same churches. I mean, this is about as perfect as any mathematician could ever imagine. Okay, mathematicians are going to love this part. Okay, so tune in. The Methodists approved of female pastors in 1956, after the PCUSA, and they've lost 60% of their members. Not quite as bad as the PCUSA. The Lutheran Church followed suit in 1970. They've lost 50% of their members thus far. The Episcopal Church followed suit in 1975. They've lost 46% of their members since then. So you can see an almost perfect correlation. PCUSA is the first, lost 67% of their members. Methodists were the next at ordaining women, lost 60% of their members so far. The Lutheran Church, next in line for ordaining women pastors, lost 50% of their members thus far. And the Episcopal Church was next, losing 46% of their members. And then finally, I forgot to mention these guys, the Christian Reformed Church ordained women in 1995, and they've lost 35% of their members so far. Okay, so this amounts to almost a perfect linear correlation on the graph. Statisticians love this kind of stuff. Ordained women and your denomination will lose 1% per year, half of your members in 40 to 50 years. So if you're planning on pretty much demolishing your denomination, a really, really good plan, okay? This is what's called a religion in decline, a faith in apostasy. Call it Ichabod Community Church. It's a strange name for a church. Ichabod Community Church. The glory has departed. Well, the evangelical Presbyterians, they're following suit. They are ordaining women elders. The Christian Missionary Alliance Church followed suit in 2023. Then the Vineyard in 2006. The Anglican Church in North America, same thing. So mega churches like Saddle Rock, North Point Ministries, doing the very same thing. So there's more to it than this. Now, there is more to it than this. This is a bigger issue. There's more fundamental problems. There's a metastasis of ideas or issues going on here. And let me just toss them at you for just a moment. So we know it isn't just ordaining women. There's more of this iceberg under the water, so to speak. It is the problem of feminism and the curse that feminism places upon marriage and the family. No question. Feminism has pretty much ruined human society. Okay, that's number one. But number two, it's also the collapse of the birth rate. You know, it's interesting. I took a look at Nancy Guthrie's Presbyterian Church down in Arizona, just for fun. This is the church that Nancy Guthrie was attending in, I think, Tucson, Arizona. Okay, 600 members in this liberal Presbyterian church and one baby born last year. Sunday school is like 8 kids. Okay, do the math on that. 600 members and one baby. Okay, we got a problem here. It's a problem of antinomianism, a hatred of God's law and the loss of the gospel where Jesus was supposed to save us from breaking God's laws. That's a problem. That's a huge problem in the evangelical and, of course, the liberal churches. And then fourthly, it's the problem of a disappearing manhood and fatherhood. That's a huge problem. So again, it's not just one thing. Now, let's talk about what will survive this onslaught of humanism and feminism and really Western apostasy of the 20th and 21st century. Just a few things, a few positive things. What will survive are churches where men still lead in their families and the church as faithful heads of their homes and courageous, wise, and loving leaders. Okay, that's critical. That's what will survive the demise of an entire civilization. Okay, that's number one. Number two, what will survive is where the average birth rate in a local church moves from 1.8 back up to 4.0. So attend a church with a birth rate around 4.0. Okay, that's critical. Not that the birth rate is 4.0 for externalistic reasons and pride issues and such, but just because people love God, they love Jesus, and they're willing to be living sacrifices for Jesus. If the church ain't crying, it's dying. Okay, somebody said that once. I thought that was pretty good. The church ain't crying, it's dying. All right, so we want crying churches, right? All right, not just nurseries. Okay, keep the kids, keep the babies there because we need to stop the enemy. That's Psalm 8, right? All right, so what will survive will also be churches that preach the hard messages, call to repentance and true faith, and where hearts are broken on the rock, that is Jesus. And then finally, what will survive will be where there is true discipleship in families and churches. I want to recommend my latest book, Strong, for those who like a short but sweet and sour at points assessment and recommendation for the church that will emerge alive and well in the 21st century. So today, the SBC and the PCA, the Southern Baptist, the Presbyterian Church of America, they shut down women pastors, women deacons thing this year in their respective conventions. I think that just happened this week. And more importantly, what does God want for our families when it comes to raising beautiful cornerstone daughters of the King in our households? Today, Danny Craig joins me on this one. Danny, this is a watershed issue for the day, and I think the SBC, the Southern Baptists, and the Presbyterian Church of America are right in the thick of it. Mm-hmm. They've addressed these issues in their general assemblies in the last 2 weeks or so, and I think at this point they're pushing off the idea of ordaining women as pastors, elders, and deacons thus far, but they're getting close. They're closing in on it.
You think so?
I think so.
I was encouraged by the SBC vote. That was pretty strong. And I was encouraged the fact that there was an affirmative action to strengthen the language. I'm not sure that the PCA is going that direction. From what I read, it seems like they are kind of leaving it to the existing standards, but the existing standards are allowing and the courts are allowing a certain amount of trouble to go on in these areas where these churches are appointing functionally women officers. But yeah, this is so significant because it gets at the heart and soul of God's vision for his kingdom.
And for the family. For
the family, and that spills out to the church.
It does. And I think, inevitably we go right back to the family, and we know that the breakdown of the family, the disintegration of the marriage, the disintegration of the family as a household unit will inevitably give room for feminism and the spirit of Jezebel to work its way into the churches.
Yeah. I think about my wife, and I am... This is what makes me excited about this topic is I've been raised around women who embraced their biblical roles. I was raised around a mom and a sister who embraced these things. And now I see the blessing, the fruitfulness, and the beauty and the joy of what that looks like in my own life being married to Megan.
And I think I've had the same thing with my mother and my two sisters, and then my family as well. I really haven't given way to the feminist ideals.
Right.
And I think, again, healthy churches are a function of healthy families. And so we're not going to see a reviving of the PCA without a reviving of the Christian family within the PCA itself. And certainly the pastors' families. And I think that's going to be key. It also bothers me a bit that what you see is an increase in women attending seminaries and getting their MDivs. And that trend is, we've been watching that for the 20 years or so we've been broadcasting, and it's just on the increase. So I think, we want to talk about how to raise daughters as exemplars in virtue. And one of the things that I think is super important in the church, I think we always say this, everything is better caught than taught. The best thing we can see about ourselves as pastors, as leading brothers in the church or whatever it might be, is that people do see us as exemplars in the virtues that God has assigned to us, first as members, but also as males, that we exemplify the Jesus virtues of courage and wisdom and love and the things that really need to mark out a man, a godly man in the church or in the family. Same thing for our young daughters. And I think this is the key. It's not so much that I want to raise my daughter, of course, to be a pastor, or to raise my daughter to be an amazing Sunday school teacher, or even like this lecturer to women at homeschool conferences across America. That's not the first thing I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is that my daughters would be, exemplify the virtues that God calls out in Scripture, such that, again, that's the most powerful way that you're going to influence anybody.
Kevin,
whether you're a male or a female, either way, the example is going to make a huge difference in your own family, but also within the church.
Kevin, what's wrong with the biblical norm? Why are we running from that?
Well, it's the satanic thing. It's everybody wants to be their own God.
Yeah.
We talked about this on a recent broadcast, I think with Sam, is that everybody wants to be their own authority. And so you get this competition of authorities, competition of gods within the family. And of course, that always disintegrates. But whether it be male or female, the best thing for the order of the family is that we submit to God's assigned duties and responsibilities and authorities that, he has assigned to me as a father and a husband, and to my wife as a wife and a mother. We're given authority. We're assigned authority by God, which means jurisdiction, which means responsibilities within that sphere. Now, I'm not supposed to go beyond it. But if we all do what we're assigned to do as husbands and wives, and by the way, as families and churches and as a state, guess what's going to happen to our communities?
have
peace
fruitful-
and joy and
Exactly.
prosperity and good things. One of the questions I asked Sam is, have you ever met a happy feminist? Have you ever met a happy feminist? It's just, it's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
So how do we raise these daughters? That's I think our question, right?
Yeah, Kevin, we have to just return to the Word of God and let the Word of God, plain and simple, define normal for us.
Yeah.
And it's pretty clear. I mean, Titus 2 is pretty clear.
Sure.
Presents a pretty clear norm.
Titus 2, 1 Timothy 2, Proverbs 31. It's there.
Yeah.
It's there. There it is.
Admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Apparently, this is a pretty big issue. And this is something that Satan uses to bring a blemish or a blot to the name of God.
Yes.
So I think returning to the biblical language, getting a biblical view of calling too. I think that I've seen in the homeschool movement, having grown up here, Kevin, that the worldly ambition, I'm going to carve my own way in the world. In some ways, we've actually bought into that more because the world came along finally and said, actually, you homeschoolers are pretty good. And then we all got excited and said, well, we're going to take over the world. And that vision kind of bled into this. Our daughters are going to go out there and conquer the world on their own. Our sons are going to go out there and conquer the world on our own. And well, wait a minute. How do we take over the world?
I was a little hesitant to do this on this broadcast, Danny, but the world does impose a vision. I mean, it's there. And somehow we're all supposed to live up to this vision. I think there is this unspoken sense that we need to conform to the world's standards and to the world's vision. So a couple of years ago, I put together this Proverbs 31, which is the biblical vision for the godly woman. It's a Proverbs 31, but this one is rewritten to the modern worldly zeitgeist. Again, sometimes I think we understand the thesis better if we can look at the antithesis. And I put this together, and it's going to seem a little tongue-in-cheeky, but I put it together as a little bit of a example, but obviously, you're not going to see all of this in one particular person. But I'm not intending to apply this to any particular person, but I think you're going to recognize the worldly vision for womanhood in this Proverbs 31, the other version, the worldly version of Proverbs 31. So the new worldly version, WNV version of Proverbs 31 is put this way: who can find a virtuous woman? For her value to the company yields 1.5% to the annual profits. The heart of her corporate boss doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need to spoil. She will do her management good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks birth control pills, a lonely apartment, and works for a 401k plan. She is like the sailors on ships. She bringeth her boyfriends and girlfriends home from the bars. She rises also while it is yet night, so she can catch the 5:15 transit into the big city for her career job. She considers a condo and buys it, and she is in debt for the rest of her life. She girds her loins with sexy garments and seeks a little approval from the eyes of flaky guys. She perceiveth that her makeup is never good enough, and she is always overly concerned about her weight. She layeth her hands to the elliptical at 24-hour fitness, and she is constantly exercising her abs. She does not serve the poor in the church, and she is too busy to pay attention to the needs of her neighbors. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for she has no household. She maketh herself coverings of Versace and Gouche. Her clothing doesn't quite do the job. Her boyfriend is known in the Guild Wars online game community, where he sitteth around playing video games all day long. Feminist pride and immodesty are her clothing, and she shall not rejoice in the time to come. She Facebooks without wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of argumentation and complaint. She forgets the ways of a functional nuclear household by her lifestyle, her media, and her educational training. Her children do not arise up and call her blessed, because they did not survive the womb, and neither doth her husband praise her, for she divorced him 10 years ago. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou has failed them all. All right, so it's a bit of a downer. It's a bit of a, oh man, this is not the kind of vision that we find in Proverbs 31, the biblical version of this section. But what you find, I think, here is materialism, self-centeredness, and you get down to the root issue here. And certainly you do not find the biblical vision for the unified household. and for the household economy.
Yeah, there's so much concern in evangelical circles about too narrowly applying the scriptural passages around women's roles.
And yet, can we say that the world has failed at every single point?
Exactly.
So what do they have to commend to us?
Yeah.
Is it the point at which we just put that all aside and say, let's just go back to the Bible on this?
Let's not nuance our way to this version of Proverbs 31 is what I'm trying to say. And I think, again, the idea of recovering a biblical view of calling. What does God want from both men and women? Well, he wants us to build godly families. He wants to invest in the local church. He wants... I think that the passages for eldership present a godly vision of manhood. There's Titus 2, a vision of godly women, reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, admonishing younger women. He wants dominion taking in the world and in his kingdom through godly marriages, as you've talked about many times, the axe head and axe handle coming together for the purpose of serving the Lord in ministry and business, whatever it is. So I think sometimes I like to say, Kevin, like, what does God want for men and women? So much of it is revealed in these normative passages. Maybe, I don't know, 80, 70, 90% of our lives, it's the career thing becomes too much of an obsession. There are these normative focuses. Let's double down there.
And let's raise our daughters to be helpers for their husbands. And oikos despotos, that is, those who can manage a home, all the aspects of the home, including the charitable department of the home, the family economy portion of the home, the children, raising the children, making sure her children are raised and taught and discipled properly. And these are all the sorts of things that God includes. And you start to set all that aside, I think you're going to find that the modern capitalistic, career-focused approach to life is yielding a breakdown of the character of each succeeding generation. We've seen that. So we've got to get back to the biblical standard for this. And again, a biblical standard of beauty, the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, very precious in the sight of God. That's 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 4. The holy women of God have trusted in God. They've adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. This is the biblical vision. And of course, it doesn't align well with Betty Friedan. Mm-hmm. It doesn't align well with the great, feminist philosophers of our generation. So we want our daughters to be of the gentle and quiet spirit. The idea of gentleness is praus, strength calibrated by submission, like the war horse. She's quiet. She has an inner peace and a calmness about her. Her heart does not churn in discontentment and frustration that she can't control things or grapple for that control. You look at 1 Timothy 2:11, that women should learn in silence with all submission. Do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. That's in context of the church. But in the context of the family, we're still seeing the need for the meek, the submissive, and the obedient daughter. And what we find is I don't know if you found this, but with our granddaughters or with our little daughters, they don't come out of the womb this way. Have you noticed that there tends to be this, even at 2 or 3 or 4 years of age, there tends to be this lack of meekness, this lack of submission, this lack of obedience. Mm-hmm. They tend not to be that way. They tend to be little feminists. Yeah. Should I put in those terms?
Selfish by nature.
Selfish by nature, but not willing to submit to authority. Mm-hmm. That seems to be something that's kind of hardwired in them that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah. And that's why the home and the family economy is so important, because this becomes the context, Kevin, in which we can teach our daughters the appropriate use of their gifts. Mm-hmm. Man, these women are so endowed by God with tremendous gifts and abilities for his kingdom.
To function in their lane. One of the ways I like to put this is, have you ever tried to run a train down the beach? It does much better on tracks. Yeah. I think that's a good way to think about it, that God has provided tracks. If we can get our daughters on these tracks, they're going to just run at 140 miles an hour, but it's within the context of how God has designed it.
Yeah. And so we want to take an approach which does not minimize gifting and leaves gifts uncultivated. And if you read the pushback on the recent SBC decision, the pushback is, well, you're just quelching women's ministry gifts. No. There are biblical context for those gifts. And I think particularly for daughters, having grown up in the homeschool movement, I think we fell down here. I think we sometimes didn't always do a great job of expanding the vision of the household, cultivating those gifts so that daughters felt like, well, I can contribute here. I can contribute in my family. I can contribute in our church. I'm thankful that Bill and Shay did that with Megan. They provided a lot of opportunities and liberty for development of gifts, QuickBooks, graphic design, hospitality, hosting large parties. We talked earlier about taking care of families with newborn children. And like now those gifts are a blessing to our family, and Megan is passing those on to Katie. And I see the biblical vision unfolding in beautiful ways in other families as well. And this inspires me.
Yeah. So let's raise our daughters to be these beautiful cornerstones in the palace of a king. And I think what you get there is a picture. I draw this from, I think, is it Psalm 112 or 127, 128? We're looking at daughters that are ready to be stable, to be strong, to be able to teach their children, to yes, be submissive, but also strong in that position of submission. I wrote these down as well. The meek and the submissive woman, she's not recalcitrant. She's not uncooperative. She's not dragging her heels constantly. She's not bossy, especially with her father and her husband. She's not argumentative and contentious. We read this in Proverbs 2:21-9, better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Number 4, she doesn't correct her father or her husband, and certainly not in front of others. She does not nag in a spirit of discontentment. She's not manipulative and controlling, and she will submit when she disagrees with the decision as long as it does not clearly violate God's law to follow through on those decisions. So now we're talking about pretty core things. Is it possible to train this into a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old? See, I think part of the issue we're dealing with here is if parents haven't trained these things into their young daughters, it's going to be rough in their future marriage and their relationship with the church as well in the future.
Katie's 8. We're in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Katie is, firstborn, very strong opinions, and the question of submission is very real.
It's an everyday thing
already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think we can help our daughters by asking early on, helping them ask critical questions.
Yeah. Hit some of those questions. Yeah.
Will I need to follow a husband someday?
Good.
If so, how can I be preparing to do that now?
Mm-hmm.
Coming to our daughters and say, God has given you this family right now.
It's a training ground.
As a training ground. Mm-hmm. Lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not always, be received well, but I think it does help get a little bit of a vision for, this is real life right now. God is preparing you for something in the future. Mm-hmm. Will you need to assist your husband in carrying out his vision for your family someday? If so, what giftings can you be developing for that purpose right now?
Yeah.
And maybe you could continue to read fantasy literature on the couch for the next 5 hours, but what do you think God might be calling you to do someday? Look at your mom. What giftings does she have? How could you be cultivating those now?
Good.
What will I need to manage a household? What skills will those require? What needs do you see in the church? How can you minister? Is there a mom with a baby that could use you to play with their little 2-year-old after church so she can visit with some other ladies? And I think then it becomes more obvious to our daughters how they plug in as we cultivate these things early on. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to conclude that like being a barista is sort of their first real life thing. No, they're doing real life at home. They're doing real life serving other families. Mm-hmm. They're doing real life in the church.
Well, I'm sure we're just beginning this conversation, but whatever we can lay down in the context of the family and parenting our young daughters, I think will be the key to producing strong families and strong churches in the years to come. And that's really the takeaway on this edition of the program, friends. I recommend to you my book, Family Life. It's just sort of a beginning, an introduction to the biblical family, but you might get a copy of Family Life to get a feel for this. I still think it's not just the one thing, it's the bigger vision. It's all these pieces we have to recover in this area in which, we have lost a concept of the family itself, the reintegrated biblical family. Let's get a vision for this. We get it straight from the scriptures. Oh, by the way, you don't need my book, Family Life. Just go to the Bible. That should do it for you. And read Proverbs 31. It's really good. The regular version of it. So you have been listening to Generations, friends, with Danny Craig and yours truly, Kevin Swanson. Please join us again next time as we continue to lay down a vision for the next generation. This has been a production of the Generations Media Network. For more information, go to generations.org/media.